They told her she was a waste of space. In the grand, cold library of the Davenport estate, surrounded by family vultures dressed in designer black, Emily Hayes was publicly branded useless. She was the quiet bookworm, the family failure, the niece who lacked the killer instinct of her corporate raider cousins. But her grandfather, the man whose billion-dollar legacy they were all gathered to claim, had left one final impossible puzzle. A sealed vault. A vault that wouldn't open for their greed or their influence. A vault that was waiting for the one name they had already dismissed. The air in the Davenport ancestral home, a sprawling stone manor in Westchester County, New York, was thick with the scent of old money and fresh grief. Or perhaps not grief. Emily Hayes perched nervously on the edge of a $40,000 antique Louis XIV chair, decided it was more the scent of anticipation. Her grandfather, Alistair Davenport, the patriarch of the Davenport Steel Empire, had been buried 3 days prior. Now the family had gathered for the main event, the reading of the will. Emily felt profoundly out of place. She, a 28-year-old rare book restorer who lived in a small Brooklyn apartment, was a sparrow in a den of wolves. Her outfit, a simple charcoal grey knit dress she'd thought respectful, felt like a burlap sack compared to the funereal couture worn by her aunt. Aunt Beatrice, her late father's sister, was the family's unofficial matriarch. She was a formidable woman, with hair sculpted into a severe platinum helmet and eyes that seemed to constantly calculate the net worth of everyone in the room. Her husband, Emily's Uncle Richard, sat beside her, a pale shadow of a man who nodded whenever Beatrice spoke. Then there was Beatrice's son, Mark. Mark was, in Emily's opinion, the worst of them all. He was 30 slick and already a vice president at Davenport Steel. He smirked as Emily caught his eye, his gaze sweeping over her with open dismissal. "Emily!" Beatrice's voice cut through the silence, as sharp and cold as the November wind rattling the leaded glass windows. "How good of you to attend. I trust you found the correct bus." Mark stifled a laugh into his silk tie. Emily's cheeks burned. "Hello, Aunt Beatrice. Uncle Richard." "Mark, the subway and train were fine, thank you." "Oh, the train," Beatrice mused, as if Emily had just described arriving via horse and buggy. "Alistair always did indulge your quaint lifestyle. Your father, bless his soul, would have insisted you join the family business. Instead, dusty books." Before Emily could respond, the heavy oak doors of the library swung open, and Mr. Harrison, the family's longtime attorney from the prestigious New York firm of Sullivan and Cromwell, entered. He was a stern man, his face a mask of professional neutrality. "Good afternoon," he said, setting his heavy briefcase on Alistair's massive mahogany desk. "We are here to read the last will and testament of Mr. Alistair Davenport. I will dispense with the legal formalities and move to the primary bequests, as per his written instructions." The room went utterly silent. Beatrice leaned forward, her diamonds glittering. Mark steepled his fingers, a predatory gleam in his eye. Mr. Harrison began to read. The manner, as expected, went to Beatrice, as she was the one who maintained the family's social standing. A significant block of stocks and a portfolio of properties in Manhattan were bequeathed to Uncle Richard. "To my grandson, Mark Davenport," Mr. Harrison continued. "In recognition of his work at the company, I leave my controlling interest in Davenport Steel, making him the new CEO and chairman of the board." Mark closed his eyes, a slow, triumphant smile spreading across his face. Beatrice reached over and squeezed his arm, her expression victorious. This was it. The power had been transferred. And finally, Mr. Harrison paused, adjusting his glasses. To my granddaughter, Emily Hayes. Emily's heart thumped. She expected nothing. A small trust fund, perhaps. Something to be managed by Beatrice. I leave my collection of rare books and the sum of $100,000 to be used for her hobby. A wave of relief and a sting of humiliation washed over Emily. A hobby. That's all it was to them. Mark leaned back, his smirk returning. $100,000. Well, Emily. You can buy a lot of glue and leather for that. Try not to spend it all in one place. Beatrice waved her hand dismissively. It's more than she deserves. She provided nothing to this family. No support, no ambition. She just drifted, taking Alistair's money for her little projects. It's a waste. Now wait, Mr. Harrison said, holding up a hand. The family looked at him, annoyed by the interruption. That was not the final bequest. What do you mean? Beatrice snapped. You named the CEO. The house is mine. What's left? The vault, Mr. Harrison said. The atmosphere in the room changed. The main vault at the bank is part of the company's Misutti's assets. Mark said, his voice suddenly sharp. It's mine now. Not that vault, Mr. Davenport, the lawyer replied, his gaze unblinking. Mr. Alistair Davenport makes reference to a private installation. He calls it the Phoenix Vault. A confused silence fell. The Davenports knew every inch of this estate, every asset. They had never heard of a Phoenix Vault. It is located according to this map in the sub-basement beneath the old observatory Alistair sealed off decades ago, Mr. Harrison explained. And its contents, Beatrice demanded. What's inside Gold-Bearer Bond's art? I do not know, Mr. Harrison said. The will simply states the contents of the Phoenix Vault are the true key to my legacy. They are to be opened and managed by the person named as its executor. Mark stood up. Who is the executor? It must be me. I'm the CEO. Beatrice held her ground. It's me. I am the head of this family. Mr. Harrison looked down at the paper. The will is very specific. The vault is biometrically sealed. It will not open for anyone save the named individual. Furthermore, he paused as if bracing himself. There is a final family meeting required at the vault's entrance. Alistair was insistent on this point. He left instructions for a recording to be played. Then let's go, Mark said, already moving toward the door. The family, trailed by the lawyer, navigated the old, cold corridors of the house. They went down the main staircase, then down a smaller servants' staircase, and finally to a dusty, locked door that led to the sub-basement. Mark, using a key from Alistair's desk, opened it. The air was damp and cold. They descended a stone staircase into a vast, dark room that had once housed Alistair's telescopes. At the far end, built into the solid bedrock foundation of the house, was something none of them had ever seen. It was a circular, bronze-plated door, at least 10 feet high. It looked ancient, yet impossibly advanced. In the center was a single, dark glass panel. My God, Beatrice whispered, her greed palpable. He built a fortress. Mr. Harrison stepped forward and pressed a small, almost invisible button on the wall. The glass panel lit up with a soft white light. A digitized voice echoed in the cold room. Alistair Davenport Memorial Archive. Please state your purpose. We are here for the reading of the final bequest, Mr. Harrison announced. Understood. Initiating final family address. Mr. Davenport recorded this message 2 months ago. The panel flickered, and suddenly Alistair Davenport's face appeared on the screen. He looked older, sicker than Emily had remembered. His sharp blue eyes seemed to stare right at them. "Hello, family," his voice rasped. "If you are hearing this, I am gone, and you are all no doubt wondering what treasure I've hidden. You are probably right. This vault contains the most valuable thing I have ever created. But value, I find, is a matter of perspective." His digital eyes seemed to find Beatrice. "Beatrice, you value status. You have the house. I hope it keeps you happy." His eyes shifted. "Mark, you value power. You have the company. A heavy burden. I hope you are strong enough to carry it." The on-screen Alistair paused. "But this vault, this is for my legacy. And my legacy is not steel. It is not property. It is truth. And the truth can only be entrusted to someone who is not blinded by an all-consuming need. Someone who is not compromised." "What is he talking about?" Mark muttered, shifting impatiently. "For months," Alistair continued, his voice growing cold, "I have watched my family. I have seen the calculations, the maneuvering. I have seen the disloyalty." A shiver ran through the room. "And I have seen one person," Alistair said, "who has asked for nothing. One person who has been mocked, dismissed, and ignored. One person who, despite it all, has shown a quiet, unshakable integrity. The only person I trust to know what to do with the truth." "This is ridiculous," Beatrice snapped. "Get on with it, old man." Alistair's image smiled a thin, cold smile. "The vault you see is keyed to one name, one biometric signature, one person who I suspect you have all overlooked." Mr. Harrison stepped forward and read the final line of the will. "The executorship and all access to the Phoenix Vault and the assets contained within are hereby granted solely to Ms. Emily Hayes." The silence was so absolute, Emily could hear the drip of water somewhere in the stone room. Then Beatrice laughed, a short, sharp, ugly sound. Her. The girl who glues paper for a living. It's a joke, a senile old man's prank. Mark's face had turned a dark, furious red. He stalked over to Emily, who had frozen in shock. He jabbed a finger in her face. "This is a mistake, a clerical error. You he hissed, his voice trembling with rage, "are nothing. You are a line item, a charity case. You are the most useless person in this entire family. You are not getting in that vault." "Mr. Davenport," Mr. Harrison said, his voice firm, "the will is ironclad, and the vault, well, the vault will only respond to Ms. Hayes. It is her name on the registry." Alistair's face on the screen gave one last chilling smile. "They called her useless," the recording of his voice whispered, as if he could hear them. "Now, let's see her unlock the vault her name is on." The aftermath of the announcement was pandemonium. "This is an outrage!" Beatrice shrieked, her voice echoing off the damp stone. "He was senile. He was on medication. I'll have this entire will thrown out by noon tomorrow. Mr. Harrison, you will file the paperwork immediately." "I will not," the lawyer said, his voice devoid of emotion. He was used to the tantrums of the rich. "I oversaw the signing of this will. Mr. Davenport was of perfectly sound mind and body. In fact, he was sharper than I've ever seen him. He was specific." Mark paced in front of the bronze door like a caged tiger. "This doesn't make any sense. A vault keyed to her. What's she going to do, bore it open with a lecture on 18th century binding techniques. "It doesn't matter what you think," Mr. Harrison said, his patience wearing thin. "The fact remains, the will stipulates that the vault must be opened now in the presence of the family. Ms. Hayes, if you would." Emily felt like she was moving through water. All eyes were on her. Beatrice's filled with venom. Mark's radiating pure, undiluted hatred. Even Uncle Richard's, which were wide with a kind of pathetic confusion. I don't know what to do," Emily whispered, looking at the glowing black panel. "Just put your hand on it," Mark snarled. "Let's get this farce over with. It won't work. It's a mistake. The scanner is probably broken." "The will," Mr. Harrison said, reading from a page Emily hadn't seen before, "provides a further instruction, a riddle of sorts. Mr. Davenport was fond of them." He cleared his throat. "The scanner will confirm identity, but the lock requires a voice-activated passcode. The riddle is this: my strength is not in what I built, but in what I saved. My legacy is not in the steel, but in the ash. Speak the name of the one who rises." Beatrice scoffed. "Riddles." He really did lose his mind. The one who rises, it's Mark. He's the one rising to CEO. "Let me try," Mark said. He shoved Emily aside and pressed his palm to the scanner. A harsh red light flashed. "Access denied. Biometric mismatch." He stepped to the voice receiver. "Mark Davenport," he yelled. "Incorrect." "It's me, you old fool," Beatrice screamed at the door. "Beatrice Davenport, the one who saved this family's name from ruin a dozen times." "Incorrect." "Davenport Steel," Richard offered weakly. "Incorrect." Alistair's recorded voice returned his tone laced with amusement. "As I said, compromised, blinded. This vault does not open for greed. It opens for gratitude. It opens for memory." The screen then turned back to a simple white light, displaying the prompt, "Awaiting executor." All eyes once again turned to Emily. She took a shaky breath. She felt small, but the word Alistair had used memory echoed in her mind. She didn't have memories of boardrooms or hostile takeovers. Her memories of her grandfather were different. She remembered being 12, her parents recently gone, feeling utterly alone in the giant cold house. She'd hidden in the library, crying. Alistair had found her. He hadn't been the corporate titan. He'd been a quiet man. He'd sat with her and shown her a book, its spine broken, its pages water-stained. "This," he'd said, his voice gentle, "is a first edition Moby Dick. It was in a fire. Everyone said it was useless, that it was just ash and paper." He'd then shown her a workshop she never knew he had. "But nothing is useless if you're willing to see its potential, Emily. We just have to restore it." He had funded her passion. He paid for her to study conservation and restoration in Florence. He was the only one who never called her work a hobby. He called it salvation. Now, standing in the cold sub-basement, she looked at the riddle. "My legacy is not in the steel, but in the ash. Speak the name of the one who rises." It wasn't a person. It wasn't the company. It was a concept. The name of the vault itself. Emily stepped forward, her hand trembling pressed against the cool glass. The light flickered, scanning her palm, her fingerprints. A soft green light pulsed. A new voice, calm and female, spoke. "Biometric identity confirmed. Welcome executor, Emily Hayes. Please provide voice key." Emily's heart was hammering against her ribs. She looked at Mark, whose face was a mask of disbelief. She looked at Beatrice, who looked moments from having an aneurysm. She leaned toward the microphone. Her voice was quiet, but it didn't tremble. The Phoenix. There was a moment of absolute silence, then a deafening thud as a series of heavy bolts, unseen, retracted deep within the wall. A hiss of compressed air followed, and with a low, grinding groan that vibrated through the stone floor, the 10-foot bronze door began to slide open. Beatrice and Mark, their fury momentarily replaced by avarice, surged forward, pushing past Emily to be the first ones inside. "What is it?" Mark demanded, peering into the darkness. "Is it gold? Is it art?" As the lights inside flickered on automatically, they revealed the contents. The family stopped dead. Emily, stepping in behind them, felt her breath catch in her throat. It wasn't a vault full of treasure. It wasn't stacked with gold bars or priceless paintings. It was an office, a perfect modern subterranean study. It was lined floor to ceiling with climate-controlled bookshelves, but they weren't filled with Alistair's first editions. They were filled with identical grey archival binders, hundreds of them. In the center of the room sat a single, massive, modern computer terminal, its monitor dark. Beatrice was the first to react. "Binders. He built a fortress for binders. This is paperwork." She stormed into the room and ripped one of the binders off the shelf. "Contracts, ledgers. What is this?" Mark, however, was drawn to the computer. "This is a server. A high-end data server." He ran his hands over it. "This is the real vault, the data." He sat down and tried to wake the computer. The screen remained black. "It's password protected. Of course it is. Emily." "He must have left you the password." Emily looked around, overwhelmed. The room didn't feel like Alistair's public study. It felt personal. It felt like her workshop, the same smell of archival paper and book cloth. Her eyes landed on a single small leather-bound book sitting on the desk separate from the others. It was the Moby Dick she and Alistair had restored together when she was a child. With trembling fingers, she opened it. Tucked inside was a single folded note written in Alistair's familiar spidery hand. "My dearest Phoenix, if you are reading this, you have passed the first test. You remembered. I am sorry to leave you this burden, but you are the only one I trust. Your family is not what it seems. They have compromised the company. They have compromised my life's work. They are thieves. This vault does not contain the past. It contains the future. But to secure it, you must first understand the truth of what they have done. The server password is not a word but a promise. The name of the first life you ever saved. I am so proud of you. A." Emily's hand flew to her mouth. The first life she ever saved. She remembered a stray cat she'd found in the rain outside the manor, half drowned. She'd nursed it back to health in her room, hiding it from Beatrice, who despised animals. Alistair had found out, and instead of being angry, he'd smiled and paid the vet bills. She walked to the terminal, her family's greedy eyes boring into her back. She sat down and touched the keyboard. The screen lit up, asking for a password. She typed in the cat's name, Barnaby. The screen flashed, "Welcome E. Hayes." And the server's desktop opened, revealing rows of encrypted files. But one file in the center of the screen was unlocked. A single video file labeled Play First. "What is it?" Mark demanded, shoving his way next to Emily, his cologne overwhelming. "An account number. A wire transfer." "What did he leave you?" "I don't know," Emily said, her hand hovering over the mouse. "Then click it, you useless girl," Beatrice shrieked. "Click the file." Emily flinched, but double-clicked the icon. The screen went black, and then Alistair Davenport's face filled the monitor again. This was not the formal recording from the vault door. This was different. He was in his study, the camera on his own laptop. He looked exhausted and frightened. "Hello, Emily," his voice said, quiet and strained. "If you are the one watching this, it means I am gone, and you are in a great deal of trouble. Or perhaps you are the only one who can fix the trouble I'm in." He sighed, running a hand over his face. "I have discovered irregularities, massive ones. My company, Davenport Steel, is being hollowed out from the inside, like a beautiful old book eaten by worms until only the cover remains." Beatrice and Mark exchanged a look, a flicker of something, not confusion, panic. "I am an old man, Emily," Alistair continued. "I built an empire of steel, but I was a fool. I trusted the wrong people. I let my own family, my own blood, handle the modern side of the business, the digital accounts, the offshore holdings. I didn't understand it, and they counted on that." "He's rambling," Mark said, his voice a half octave too high. "This is nothing." "For the past 6 months," Alistair said, his eyes boring into the camera, "I have been using my hobby, this vault, this server, to mirror the company's private ledgers. I hired an outside auditor, a forensic accountant from Geneva, a brilliant man named Julian Vance. He found where the worms are hiding." Alistair's hand reached for the mouse on his end. A new window opened on the screen. It was a complex spreadsheet, rows and rows of numbers. "It started small," Alistair explained, his voiceover guiding Emily's eyes. "Padding expense reports, inflated invoices from shell companies. But then it grew." He highlighted a series of wire transfers, massive 8-figure sums moving from Davenport Steel's accounts to an untraceable holding company in the Cayman Islands, a company called MR Holdings. "MR Holdings," Alistair's voice said, thick with disgust. "It took Mr. Vance 3 months to crack it. So simple, really. So arrogant." He opened another file. It was the Articles of Incorporation for MR Holdings, and there, listed as the principal owners, were the signatories. The camera view on the screen pulled back, showing Alistair's face again. He looked utterly broken. "The signatories, Emily. The thieves who have been bleeding me dry, bankrupting my company and stealing your inheritance, are Mark Davenport and your Uncle Richard Hayes." The air was sucked out of the room. Uncle Richard, who had been silent this whole time, let out a strangled gasp and collapsed onto a chair, his face the color of ash. Mark was frozen, his face a grotesque mask of shock and rage. "No, it's a lie. It's a fake. He faked those documents." "He knew," Emily whispered, looking at her uncle, who was now weeping silently into his hands. "He knew." "Of course he knew." Beatrice suddenly lunged, not at her husband, but at Emily. Her hands, tipped with sharp red nails, clawed for the keyboard. You did this. You poisoned him against us. You manipulated a senile old man." Emily scrambled back, but Beatrice was fast. She grabbed the mouse, trying to close the file. "You will not destroy this family, you little parasite." "Stop!" a voice boomed. It was Mr. Harrison. He had been standing silently at the entrance, his face grim. He pulled out his phone. "Mr. Harrison, do something!" Beatrice shrieked. "She's trying to frame us." "On the contrary, Mrs. Davenport," the lawyer said, his voice like ice. "I am doing exactly what I was instructed to do. Mr. Davenport, in his final letter to me, stated that if this vault was opened and discrepancies were found, I was to execute his final directive. What directive? Mark snarled, finally finding his voice. I am the CEO. You work for me now. No, Mr. Davenport. I work for the estate, and the estate is not what you think. Mr. Harrison pressed a button on his phone. Mr. Vance. Yes, it's Harrison. We are in. The package is open. Please proceed. Proceed with what? Mark demanded. Alistair. Mr. Harrison explained. Gave his auditor, Mr. Vance, a dead man's switch. The moment I confirmed the vault was open, Mr. Vance, from his office in Geneva, was instructed to forward the entire contents of that server, every ledger, every transfer, every offshore account, to the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York and to the IRS. Richard Hayes let out a high-pitched wail and fell to the floor. Beatrice's face went from red to a terrifying waxy white. Mark didn't move. He simply stared at the computer screen, which was now flashing a small icon, Upload Complete. You, Mark whispered, turning to Emily. His composure was gone, replaced by a primal, terrifying hatred. You, useless, bitch. You have just signed our death warrants. You have ruined everything. I didn't do anything, Emily stammered, backing away. Grandfather did. You did this to yourselves. That doesn't matter, Mark roared, sweeping the ancient Moby Dick off the desk. You think you've won. You think you're the smart one. You just exposed the company, your inheritance, to a massive federal investigation. The stock is going to be worthless by morning. The government will freeze everything. You haven't won anything. Emily, you've just inherited a corpse. He's right, Beatrice said, her voice a dead, hollow whisper. She suddenly looked 20 years older. The company is finished. The money is gone. It's all gone. She started to laugh, a dry, hysterical cackle that echoed in the vault. Congratulations, Emily. You're the queen of the ashes. Emily looked at the screen, at the files that represented the total implosion of her family's legacy. She looked at her weeping uncle, her hysterical aunt, and her cousin, who seemed to be vibrating with a rage that was borderline murderous. The title of the vault echoed in her head. The Phoenix Vault. A phoenix rises from the ashes. But Mark was right. All she could see were ashes. There was nothing left to rise from. She had unlocked the vault, only to find a tomb. The following 2 hours were a blur of sirens, uniforms, and legal jargon. Mr. Harrison, it turned out, had not come alone. He had notified the local police, forewarning them of a contentious will reading that might require a civil standby. When he had called Mr. Vance, he had also, it seemed, signaled the authorities. 2 plain-clothes detectives, who introduced themselves as Detective Miller and Detective Chen, arrived with a warrant. The warrant wasn't for the house, but for data. The U.S. Attorney's Office, having received the data dump from Julian Vance, had apparently moved faster than anyone could have anticipated. Mark and Richard were read their rights. Richard was sobbing so uncontrollably he could barely stand. Mark, however, had gone rigid. He was silent, his eyes fixed on Emily, with a look of such profound loathing that she had to look away. Beatrice was in the library upstairs, being questioned by a female officer, her hysteria having conveniently vanished, replaced by a cold, calculating fury as she repeated the name of her lawyer over and over. Emily sat on the floor of the vault, her back against the cold bronze door. She felt numb. Mr. Harrison sat with her, his professional mask softened by something like pity. "He put you in an impossible position, Ms. Hayes," the lawyer said quietly. "He destroyed his own company," Emily murmured. "He destroyed everything. Why? Why would he do that? And why me?" "He didn't destroy it," Mr. Harrison said. "They did." He gestured to the binders. This is the proof. He spent the last year of his life building a case against his own family. He loved that company. But I think he realized the company Davenport Steel was already dead. He was just signing the death certificate. "So what happens now?" Emily asked, her voice small. "Now, the law, the U.S. attorney will seize the assets of MR Holdings. They will likely freeze Mark and Richard's personal accounts. Davenport Steel will be locked down pending a forensic audit of a scale I can barely comprehend. The stock will plummet to zero tomorrow morning. It will be carved up and sold for parts to pay its creditors. The Davenport name, I'm afraid, will be synonymous with fraud by nightfall." "So Beatrice was right," Emily said, a single tear tracing a path down her dusty cheek. "I am the Queen of Ashes." "Perhaps," Mr. Harrison said, standing up. "The detectives need me to sign the evidence manifest. They are taking the server, but per the will, the vault and its remaining contents belong to you. I suggest you review what's left." Alistair was not a man to leave loose ends. He called this the Phoenix Vault, not the Ashes Vault. The lawyer left, leaving Emily alone in the subterranean office. The police had taken the server, leaving a glaring empty space on the desk. All that remained were the hundreds of grey binders, the empty chair, and the copy of Moby Dick that Mark had angrily thrown to the floor. Emily picked it up. The spine, the one she had so painstakingly repaired, was broken again. She sank into the chair, the sense of loss overwhelming. She was once again that 12-year-old girl, alone in the library. Her grandfather had given her a purpose then. Now he had given her. What a ruin! She looked at the binders. She pulled one down. It was labeled Project PA Year 1. It was full of technical schematics, patent applications, not for steel but for optics laser scanning. She pulled down another. PA Year 2, Software Development, Archival Kernels, and another. PA Year 3, Prototypes, Client Trials Vatican Library, Bodleian Library. This was not a steel company. This was a tech company. She went back to the desk. Tucked away in a drawer Mark had overlooked was a simple silver laptop, a personal one. She opened it. It was not password protected. The desktop was clean, except for one folder labeled simply Phoenix. She opened it. Inside was a business plan, a full detailed 200-page business plan for a startup company. The name on the letterhead was Phoenix Archival Solutions. Emily began to read. Her numbness was replaced by a racing electric shock. Alistair, in his last year, hadn't just been building a case against his family. He had been secretly building a new company. He had been using the profits from Davenport Steel, but not just to move them to offshore accounts. He had been siphoning millions before Mark and Richard could, redirecting them into this new venture. He had used his pet project with Emily, her love of restoring books, as a smokescreen. Phoenix Archival Solutions was a company built on a single revolutionary idea. Alistair had funded a team of engineers in a private unmarked R&D lab in Delaware registered under a holding company named Barnaby LLC to create a new form of non-invasive scanning. A technology that could digitally archive fragile ancient manuscripts without ever touching them, using a combination of terahertz imaging and AI-driven text recognition. The spreadsheets in the folder showed the money. He had poured nearly $90 million into it. The binders on the shelves were the R&D. The prototypes were already in use secretly at the biggest libraries in the world. Alistair knew Davenport Steel was a 19th century dinosaur, being eaten alive by 21st century greed. He couldn't save it. Done. He let it burn. He had created a lifeboat. But there was one last file. A letter text file. Emily. This is the second riddle, and you are the only answer. Phoenix Archival is my true legacy. It is a brilliant, world-changing company. But it is vulnerable. It is, as of this moment, an asset of the Davenport estate. And the estate is now tied to a massive federal crime. The vultures will try to claim this. The government, in its effort to pay the steel company's debts, will try to liquidate this new company before it ever truly flies. They will see it as just another asset to be auctioned. They will not understand it. They will say it is a hobby, a pet project. They will call it useless. They will try to take it from you. You must not let them. The will gives you the vault. This is the vault's real content. The data on the server was just the key to close the old door. This business plan is the key to open the new one. You are the only one who speaks the language. You are the only one who understands that preservation is not about the past, it is about the future. You are not a book gluer, Emily. You are a guardian. Don't let them call you useless. Don't let them take your future. This is the real inheritance. Now go and fight for it. Emily closed the laptop. The numbness was gone. The fear was gone. A cold, clear anger had taken its place. She walked out of the vault, leaving the broken Moby Dick on the desk. She walked up the stone steps past the chaos of the police investigation and into the Grand Library. Beatrice was there, her lawyer, having just arrived. Mark was in handcuffs, being led out the front door, his eyes still burning with hate. "There she is!" Beatrice shrieked, pointing at Emily. "The one who destroyed us. I hope you're happy, Emily. I hope you enjoy your... nothing. They will take everything. You will be just as penniless as you were yesterday." Emily stopped. She looked at her aunt, this woman who had tormented her for 2 decades. She looked at her sharp designer suit and her perfectly cruel face. "You're wrong, Aunt Beatrice," Emily said, her voice clear and strong. It didn't echo, but it cut through the room. "What?" Beatrice scoffed. "You said I inherited a corpse. You're right. Davenport Steel is dead. You and Mark killed it." Emily walked closer, her gaze unwavering. "But Grandfather didn't leave me the steel company. He left me his legacy. And you were all too stupid, too greedy and too compromised to even know what it was." Emily smiled. It was not a kind smile. It was the smile of Alistair Davenport. "You were right about one thing. I'm not a business person. I'm a restorer. And I'm about to restore the family name." "Now, if you'll excuse me," Emily said, pulling out her phone. "You're in my house. I'd like you to leave." She didn't wait for a reply. She walked past her sputtering apoplectic aunt and dialed the number for the lead engineer listed in the business plan. "Hello," Emily said, stepping out onto the cold stone terrace. This is Emily Hayes, Alistair Davenport's granddaughter. Yes, that one. We have a lot of work to do, and we need to start right now. The 6 months that followed were a trial by fire. Emily had been right. The battle had just begun. The fall of Davenport Steel was immediate and catastrophic. It was the lead story on every financial network. Davenport CEO and CFO arrested for massive fraud. Historic steel empire collapses. Davenport heiress left with billions in debt. The U.S. Attorney's Office, in its quest to reclaim the hundreds of millions stolen, placed a lien on all assets of the Davenport estate. That included the Westchester Manor, the art, the cars, and as Alistair had predicted, the unassuming Barnaby LLC and its Phoenix Archival project. The government's lawyers saw Phoenix Archival as a black hole of debt, a vanity project Alistair had wasted nearly $100 million on. Their plan was simple: liquidate it. Sell the patents, sell the prototypes, sell the lab equipment, and use the scraps to pay back the steel company's creditors. Beatrice, having lost the house, was living in a rented condo, her assets frozen. She spent her days giving rabid interviews to any tabloid that would listen, painting Emily as a conniving, treacherous snake who had destroyed the family out of jealousy. Emily was, for a time, truly alone. She sold her Brooklyn apartment and her rare book collection, her own assets, to pay for the legal fight. She moved into the modest R&D headquarters in Delaware, sleeping on a cot in a back office. The first hearing was in a sterile federal courtroom in Manhattan. Emily sat at one table with a single, overworked probate lawyer. The other table was crowded with government attorneys, creditor lawyers, and lawyers representing the newly bankrupt Davenport Steel. The government's attorney, a sharp man named Peterson, laid out his case. "Your Honor, Ms. Hayes is a book restorer. She has zero business experience. She is clinging to an asset that is nothing more than a sinkhole. We have a buyer, a large tech conglomerate, willing to purchase the patents for $12 million. We request the court approve the sale to satisfy the estate's creditors." "$12 million?" the judge, a pragmatic woman named Judge Kaplan, asked. "Mr. Davenport spent nearly $90 million on it." "Exactly, Your Honor," Peterson said with a smug smile. "It was a failed project, a rich man's hobby. We are lucky to get 12. Judge Kaplan looked at Emily. "Ms. Hayes, you are contesting this." Emily stood. Her hands were shaking. She was wearing an ill-fitting suit she'd bought at a consignment shop. She looked at the sea of hostile faces. "Your Honor," Emily said, her voice quiet. "Mr. Peterson is wrong. He's wrong about everything. He says this project is a failure. He says I have no experience." She placed a stack of papers on the witness stand. "This is a signed letter of intent from the Biblioteca Apostolica Vaticana, the Vatican Library. This is another from the British Museum. They are not intent to buy. They are intent to license. They are beta testers who are calling our technology revolutionary and the new gold standard in archival preservation." She continued, her voice gaining strength. "Mr. Peterson calls it a hobby. I call it the future. He wants to sell the patents, the engine of the company, for scraps. I am asking for the chance to turn the engine on." "And how do you plan to do that?" "Ms. Hayes," the judge asked, leaning forward, intrigued. "The estate is bankrupt. You have no operating capital." This was it. The moment. "I don't need the estate's money." "Your Honor," Emily said, "I have my own." A murmur went through the courtroom. "I have secured a line of credit for $50 million. Peterson burst out laughing. "From who? She's penniless." "From Mr. Julian Vance," Emily said clearly. The courtroom fell silent. Julian Vance, the Geneva auditor, had become a minor celebrity. The whistleblower who had brought down the Davenport empire. Emily explained. Mr. Vance, it turns out, was not just an auditor. He was an old friend of my grandfather's. He was impressed that I had chosen to fight for the company instead of letting it be sold. He believes in the technology. He has agreed to be my primary investor and partner. He has also agreed to serve as Phoenix Archival's interim CFO. Judge Kaplan looked at the government's lawyer. Mr. Peterson was no longer smiling. Your Honor, Emily pressed, the government wants to satisfy creditors. Selling this company for $12 million is a rounding error against the $400 million that Mark and Richard stole. But if you give me 6 months, if you unfreeze this asset and let me run it, I believe Phoenix Archival can generate billions in revenue, enough to actually make the creditors whole, and, she added, to pay the back taxes my family evaded. She was in essence offering to clean up her family's entire mess. The judge looked at the letter from Julian Vance. She looked at the letters from the Vatican and the British Museum. Then she looked at the government's lowball offer. Mr. Peterson, the judge said, your motion to liquidate is premature. I am granting Ms. Hayes a stay. 6 months. She has 6 months to prove this company is viable. If she fails, we sell it. If she succeeds, well, let's see if the Phoenix can in fact rise. Emily walked out of the courtroom, her legs feeling like jelly. She had won the battle. But the war to build a multi-billion-dollar company from scratch in 6 months had just begun. The next 6 months were a blur of 20-hour days. Emily was not a CEO. She was, as she had told her grandfather, a restorer. So she did not run the company. She restored it. She brought Julian Vance in as CFO, and his ruthless Swiss efficiency cleaned up the Barnaby LLC books, making them transparent and ready for investors. She promoted the lead engineer, a brilliant but socially awkward woman named Dr. Aris Thorne, to Chief Technology Officer. Dr. Thorne had been Alistair's secret weapon, the brain behind the scanner. The team, which had been working in fear, suddenly found a new sense of purpose. Emily's useless skills became her greatest asset. The tech conglomerates who wanted to buy them out didn't understand the client. They talked about data optimization and scan speeds. Emily, visiting the libraries and museums herself, spoke their language. She talked about preserving cultural heritage. She understood the irreplaceable value of a 1,000-year-old manuscript. She wasn't selling them a scanner, she was selling them immortality. While Dr. Thorne perfected the technology, Emily and Julian Vance hit the road. They didn't go to Silicon Valley venture capitalists who wanted to gut the company and go public in a year. They went to old money. They went to philanthropic foundations, university endowments, and historical societies. They went to people who, like Alistair, understood that some things were worth more than a quarterly report. The useless bookworm, who had been mocked for being quiet, turned out to be a powerhouse negotiator. She was soft-spoken, but her knowledge was encyclopedic. She was polite, but she was unbending. She was, as Julian Vance remarked to a potential investor, a velvet hammer. 3 months in, they had their first breakthrough. A consortium of universities, led by Harvard and Oxford, signed a collective $150 million contract for the Phoenix scanners and a 10-year subscription to their archival cloud service. 4 months in, the French government signed a $200 million deal to digitize the archives of the Louvre and the Bibliothèque Nationale. By the end of the 5-month mark, Phoenix Archival Solutions was not only viable, it was profitable. It had a valuation confirmed by Goldman Sachs of $1.2 billion. Emily's name was no longer a footnote in her family's fraud trial. It was on the cover of Forbes and Wired. The Phoenix Rises, one headline read, "How the Useless Heiress Turned Her Grandfather's Hobby into a billion-dollar tech empire." The court date arrived. The courtroom was packed. Judge Kaplan looked at the new valuation report. She looked at the government's lawyers, who were silent. "Ms. Hayes," the judge said, a small smile on her face, "it seems you have exceeded expectations." The stay was lifted. The asset was officially unfrozen and declared the sole separate property of Emily Hayes. She used the company's first profits to pay off the legitimate debts of the old steel company, making the creditors whole and separating her new legacy from the old. As Emily left the courtroom, she was met by a media scrum. But one person stood on the steps apart from the rest. It was Beatrice. She looked small. Her designer clothes were gone, replaced by a cheap-looking department store suit. Her platinum hair was dull. The fury was gone, replaced by a desperate, hollow look. "Emily," she said, her voice raspy. Emily stopped, her lawyers tensing beside her. I have nothing," Beatrice whispered. "Richard is in prison. Mark took a plea deal. He'll be in for 20 years. They took everything, the house, the accounts. I am working as a hostess in a restaurant in Queens." Emily looked at her aunt. She felt nothing. No pity, no anger, just a void. "What do you want, Beatrice?" Emily asked. "A job." Beatrice begged, her eyes filling with tears. "Anything. A receptionist. I can answer phones. Please, Emily. For your father's memory. For the family." Emily stared at her for a long moment. She remembered the girl in the knit sweater. She remembered the sting of the word useless. "I am hiring actually," Emily said. Beatrice's face lit up with desperate hope. "My R&D lab in Delaware is expanding." Emily continued, her voice flat and cold. "The night shift janitorial crew needs a new supervisor. The pay is $19 an hour. You'd have to move to Wilmington." Beatrice's face crumpled. A janitor," she spat, the old venom returning. "You'd make me clean toilets." "It's a job, Beatrice," Emily said, turning to walk away. "It's more than you offered me. It's not nothing. It's not useless. It's work. Something you've avoided your entire life." She left her aunt standing on the steps, consumed by the final burning ashes of her own arrogance. 1 year later, Emily Hayes stood on a stage in Davos, Switzerland, at the World Economic Forum. She was the keynote speaker, a global leader in the new field of digital preservation. She wore a simple, elegant, dark blue dress, the quiet confidence she now exuded, holding the room of billionaires and world leaders captive. "We are not a tech company," she said, her voice resonating through the hall. "We are a memory company. We believe that our history, our stories, our art, are not just things to be locked away in dusty vaults. They are a living part of our future. My grandfather built an empire of steel, a material of strength, but he taught me that true strength isn't in steel. It's in the things that endure, the things that survive the fire, the things that, when called useless, find a way to rise again." Her speech was met with a standing ovation. Afterward, she flew back not to New York but to Delaware. She bypassed the new gleaming glass headquarters of Phoenix Archival and drove to the Westchester Manor. She had bought it back, at auction, for pennies on the dollar. She didn't live there. She was turning it into the headquarters of the Davenport Foundation for Cultural Preservation, a non-profit funded by her company that would restore and archive priceless works for free. She walked through the empty, echoing halls, finally arriving at the library. The room was empty, the furniture sold off. She went to the sub-basement. The bronze door of the Phoenix Vault was still there, open. She had left it just as it was. It was her office now, her real office. The empty binders were gone, replaced by the books she had repurchased. Her first edition, Moby Dick, its spine broken for a second time, sat in the center of the desk. She ran a hand over it. She had left it broken. A reminder. Julian Vance, now her full-time CFO, and more importantly, her friend, met her at the door. "Another successful trip, boss," he said, his Swiss accent always carrying a hint of a smile. "It was good," Emily said, sitting in Alistair's old chair. "You got a letter," he said, handing it to her, "from a federal prison. It was from Mark." Emily opened it. It was not an apology. It was a single, hate-filled page, detailing in graphic detail all the ways he was going to destroy her when he got out. Emily read it, her expression unchanged. "Trouble?" Julian asked. "No," Emily said. She didn't tear it up. She didn't burn it. She folded it, walked over to a high-tech scanner in the corner, the very first Phoenix 1.0 prototype, and placed the letter on the scanning bed. "What are you doing?" Julian asked. "Archiving," Emily said, as the brilliant, harmless laser light swept across the page. "I'm preserving the truth. All of it. The good, the bad, and the useless." The machine beeped the letter, now digitized, saved forever, in an encrypted cloud. Emily smiled, looking at Alistair's desk, finally understanding his last great lesson. He hadn't just saved his company. He had saved her. He had taken the one person they all thought was broken, and he had remade her. He had shown her that her useless passion was in fact the only thing in the world that truly mattered. She was Emily Hayes. She was the restorer. She was the guardian. And she was the Phoenix. And just like that, the woman they called useless became the only one who mattered. Emily didn't just inherit a fortune. She built a new one from the ashes of her family's lies, all because her grandfather knew that real value isn't in steel or stock prices, it's in quiet integrity. The family who saw only greed was left with nothing, while the one who valued history became the one to make it. That is the ultimate karma. What did you think of Emily's revenge? Was it colder than the vault itself? Let me know in the comments what you thought of Beatrice's final pathetic plea. Thank you so much for watching. If you loved this story of justice and karma, please hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to see it. And most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you never miss a story. We have new dramas dropping every week, and you won't want to miss what's next. The glittering champagne flutes of the Blackwood family clinked in a toast to their own success. At the far end of the table sat Emily Vance, the forgotten relative, the family joke, dressed in a simple wool dress that cost less than their appetizers. They laughed at her, pointing to her modest job and her quiet demeanor. But they didn't know the secret her mother protected for 30 years. Tonight, the laughter will die. Because the woman they're mocking isn't just a poor relation. She's the true heir, and she's about to inherit everything they have. The invitation was an anomaly, a thick cream-colored rectangle of cardstock that felt absurdly heavy in Emily Vance's small Brooklyn mailbox. It had been forwarded from her old apartment, then her older one, chasing her through a life of rented rooms and quiet anonymity. The embossed crest of the Blackwood family was arrogant, a golden griffin clutching a diamond. Emily was a Vance, not a Blackwood. The distinction was crucial. Her grandmother, Amelia Vance, née Pendleton, had been the great shame of the Pendleton dynasty, the daughter who had run off with a penniless musician instead of merging with another banking family. The other Pendleton daughter, Cassandra, had done her duty marrying into the ambitious but new money Blackwood family. For 2 generations, the Blackwoods had managed the vast Pendleton Global Enterprises, a sprawling empire of shipping, real estate, and private equity. And for 2 generations, they had treated the Vance line as a regrettable stain, a branch of the family tree that had withered and fallen off. Emily, at 30, was the last of the Vances. She was an archivist at the Morgan Library and Museum, a job she adored, surrounded by the silent, leather-bound stories of people long gone. She lived in a 400-square-foot studio, ate takeout, and her one luxury was a monthly contribution to her meager 401k. The invitation was for the annual Founders' Dinner, a celebration of Arthur Pendleton, the cantankerous patriarch who had built the empire. Emily hadn't seen the Blackwoods since she was 10 at a disastrous Christmas party, where her cousin Julian had accidentally spilled an entire bottle of ink on her only party dress, claiming she looked better as a Rorschach test. She should have thrown the invitation away, but her late mother's voice echoed in her mind. They are arrogant, Emily, but they are still family. Never let them forget we exist. We are Pendletons just as much as they are. So she went. She took the F train to the 4 train, her simple charcoal grey wool dress hidden beneath her practical winter coat. She emerged onto the Upper East Side, a neighborhood that felt like a different climate zone. The air was thinner, the silence punctuated only by the click of designer heels on flagstone. The Blackwood mansion was a limestone fortress on 67th Street, its windows blazing with light, defying the November chill. A stern butler who looked her up and down as if she were a delivery person arriving at the wrong entrance finally let her in. The foyer was a marble expanse that echoed the sound of her scuffed heels. She could hear them already, the high, brittle laughter of Beatrice Blackwood, her great-aunt, and the booming, self-satisfied voice of Marcus, the family's current patriarch. She shed her coat, revealing the dress. It was modest, high-necked, and perfectly appropriate for her job. Here, surrounded by silk sequins and jewels that could pay her rent for a decade, it was a social crime. Beatrice glided over her face a perfect taut mask. Emily, you came. Her eyes flicked over Emily's dress. How wonderfully practical of you. Aunt Beatrice, Emily said, her voice quiet but firm. Thank you for the invitation. Yes, well, we do try to include everyone, Beatrice said, her smile not reaching her eyes. Julian. Look who's here. It's your little cousin, the librarian. Julian Blackwood, 32, and already sculpted by the entitlement of a man who had never been told no, sauntered over. He was handsome in the sharp, angular way of a predator. He held a glass of what Emily guessed was 25-year-old Scotch. Emily. Still playing with dusty books, are we? He smirked, leaning in conspiratorially. I hope you didn't take the subway. The grime is just so hard to get out of one's clothes. Emily met his gaze. It's an archive, Julian, and the subway was fine, thank you. Well, hurry along, Beatrice chirped, dismissing her with a wave. Dinner is being served. You're at the end, dear, with the younger cousins. Emily was escorted to the far end of a magnificent 30-foot-long dining table, a football field of polished mahogany. She was seated next to 2 sullen teenagers, scrolling through their phones, and across from a second cousin twice removed, who was already half drunk. The main family. Marcus Beatrice Julian and his vapid fiancée, Chloe, were enthroned at the head 29 feet away. The dinner, Emily felt, had officially begun. The first course arrived, a single colossal scallop, resting on a bed of squid ink risotto dotted with gold leaf. Emily stared at it. It was beautiful, but it represented more than her weekly grocery budget. The distant cousins poked at theirs, whispering about a ski trip to Gstaad. At the head of the table, the conversation was loud, performative, and centered on one person, Julian. "The Singapore acquisition was brilliant, Julian," Marcus boomed, raising his glass. "Finalizing the deal on the 15th was a masterstroke." "It was nothing, Father," Julian said, though his posture screamed self-congratulation. "Just cleaning up the portfolio. Grandfather Pendleton let too many assets stagnate. He was old-fashioned." Beatrice laughed, a sound like tiny bells. "Oh, Arthur was a romantic. But romance doesn't fund the foundation, does it? It takes a real man, a practical man, to run an empire. Like my Julian." Emily felt a small hot spike of anger. Her grandmother had been the romantic, and her great-grandfather, for all his faults, had built this. Julian was just a parasite born on third base and convinced he'd hit a triple. She focused on her scallop, cutting it into tiny, precise pieces. She was an archivist. She knew how to be silent, how to observe, how to wait. The main course was served a perfectly pink rack of lamb. The wine, a deep Bordeaux, was poured by gloved waiters. The conversation had stalled for a moment, and in that lull, Julian's gaze found Emily. His eyes glittered with a familiar, bored cruelty. "Oh, I've been meaning to ask," he called out, his voice silencing the table. All heads turned. "Emily, how is the common man faring? Tell us. We're all so insulated up here." Emily froze her fork halfway to her mouth. The teenagers beside her looked up from their phones, suddenly interested in the blood sport. "I wouldn't know Julian," Emily said evenly. "I'm just a woman." A few people tittered. Julian's smile widened. He hadn't gotten the reaction he wanted. "No, really," he pressed, leaning forward. "That little job of yours at what is it?" "The public library." "The Morgan Library and Museum," Emily corrected softly. "It's a private collection." "Ah, a private collection," Julian boomed as if she'd said something hilarious. "Well, that's something, I suppose. Tell me, do you get to shush people? Is that the main thrill? Or is it the satisfaction of stamping those little cards? Do they even still use those?" Laughter erupted from the middle of the table. Chloe, his fiancée, giggled and hid her face behind her napkin. "It's mostly archival preservation and digital cataloging," Emily said, her cheeks burning. She refused to look away. "Digital cataloging." Julian clapped his hands. "My God, how thrilling. And the pay, it must be. Well, dozens of dollars, I'm sure." The laughter was louder now. "It's enough," Emily said. "Enough for what?" a cousin named Daphne chimed in, emboldened. "Enough for that dress. It's very sensible." Now, Daphne," Beatrice said, a fake pout on her lips. "Not everyone can appreciate haute couture. Some people are just built for the rack. It's a matter of breeding." The final insult landed. Breeding. The direct implication Emily as a Vance was poorly bred, an inferior bloodline. Emily placed her silver fork and knife neatly on her plate, parallel to each other. The thwack of the metal on the china was surprisingly loud in the momentary silence. She looked first at Beatrice. "My mother taught me that breeding is about character, aunt, not thread count." She then turned her gaze back to Julian. "And yes, Julian, I stamp things. I preserve history. It's quiet work. It's real work. It's not just living off the fumes of a man who died 50 years ago." The table went dead silent. Julian's smile vanished, replaced by a flash of genuine fury. He had been publicly challenged, however quietly, by the family. Nothing. Marcus Blackwood slammed his hand on the table, making the glasses jump. "That is enough, Emily. You are a guest in this house. You will show respect to the man who will one day be running the company that, I might add, you are not a part of." "Father, it's fine," Julian said, recovering, waving a dismissive hand. "She's just lashing out. It's understandable. Poverty makes people so prickly. Let her have her little moment." He raised his glass, that infuriating smirk back in place. "A toast to the Vances. May they one day learn that it's better to be rich and silent than poor and— what was that word, Emily? Oh yes, relevant." They laughed. They all laughed at her. They drank their wine, and the conversation moved on, leaving her isolated at the end of the table, a living ghost in a wool dress. Emily picked up her water glass. Her hand was perfectly steady. She took a slow, deliberate sip. She felt the eyes of the family on her, the pity, the contempt, the amusement. They thought they had won. They thought they had put her back in her place. She looked at the clock on the grand mantel. 7:45 p.m. They had no idea what was coming. Dessert was a needlessly complex chocolate sphere that melted when the waiter poured hot caramel sauce over it. As the final plates were cleared, Marcus Blackwood stood tapping his glass with a spoon. "Friends, family," he began, beaming. He was a portly man, but he carried himself with the unassailable confidence of someone whose wealth insulated him from all consequences. "Tonight is a special night. We gather every year to honor my wife's father, Arthur Pendleton. A great man, a visionary." He paused, glancing at a set of notes. "But this year is different. It marks a transition. As you know, I have been the steward of Pendleton Global for 30 years, guiding it, growing it, making it the titan it is today." Emily resisted the urge to roll her eyes. He'd guided it by firing 20,000 employees in the 90s, and grown it by leveraging its assets into near-catastrophic debt, which only a timely government bailout had fixed. "But I am not getting any younger," Marcus continued with a fake paternal sigh. "It is time for new blood, new vision. And so it is my profound pleasure to announce that the board of directors, at a special meeting this morning, unanimously approved the final transfer of leadership." He placed his hand on Julian's shoulder, who stood up to join him. "As of tomorrow, November 14th, my son Julian Blackwood will assume the titles of Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of Pendleton Global Enterprises." A robust, slightly forced round of applause filled the room. Julian raised his glass, his teeth gleaming. "Thank you, Father. Thank you all. I promise to take Grandfather's legacy and, well, to be frank, to make it finally turn a real profit. It's a new era." "To Julian," Marcus roared. "To Julian," the family echoed. They all stood raising their glasses. Emily remained seated. Her lack of movement drew Julian's eye. He frowned, but before he could make another cutting remark, the deep, resonant bong of the front doorbell echoed through the house. A sudden, unwelcome silence fell. Nobody visited the Blackwoods unannounced. The butler, looking flustered, appeared at the dining room archway. "Mr. Blackwood, apologies, sir. There are visitors. They insist it is urgent." "Urgent," Marcus barked, his good mood evaporating. What is the meaning of this? I told staff, no interruptions. They are from a law firm, sir. They say it concerns the estate. The estate is settled, Marcus snapped. Get rid of them. I'm afraid that won't be possible, Mr. Blackwood. A new voice, crisp and cold as the November air, cut through the room. Two people, a man and a woman, stepped past the butler. They were both dressed in severe, impeccably tailored black suits. They looked like high-end undertakers, or as Emily instantly recognized, senior litigators. The man was older, with silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses. The woman was in her 40s, sharp, with an aura of absolute uncompromising competence. She carried a thick, leather-bound briefcase. "Marcus Blackwood?" the man asked. His voice wasn't loud, but it commanded the room. "I am," Marcus said, bristling, "and you are trespassing. This is a private dinner. My name is Harrison Thorne," the man said, handing Marcus a card. "And this is my colleague, Ms. Isabel Reed. We are senior partners at Cravath, Swain and Moore. We are here tonight as the sole legal executors of the estate of Arthur Pendleton." A nervous ripple went through the room. "Executors?" Beatrice scoffed, stepping forward. "That's impossible. Our firm, Sullivan and Cromwell, has handled the estate for 50 years. They handled the management." Ms. Reed corrected, her voice precise. "We handled the disposition. We have been waiting as per our client's instructions for this specific date, November 13th. The eve of the day, his first great-grandchild, that would be you, Mr. Blackwood." She nodded at Julian. "Turns 32. "What is this nonsense?" Julian said, stepping down from his father's side. "Some kind of legal prank. The board voted today. It's done. I'm in charge." "The board," Mr. Thorne said, consulting a document from his briefcase, "voted to appoint you interim CEO contingent upon the final release of the Pendleton majority shares, which are held in a blind trust. A trust that until 1 hour ago was sealed." "Sealed by whom?" Marcus demanded. "By our client, Mr. Arthur Pendleton," Thorne replied. "He left rather specific instructions, and a final codicil to his will that was to be read only upon this night in the event that you—" He motioned to Marcus. "Attempted to install your son as his successor." "Attempted." Marcus was turning a deep shade of purple. "I did install him, precisely," Ms. Reed said, opening her briefcase with a sharp click, "which triggers Article 4, Section 2B of the will, the character clause." The room was so quiet, Emily could hear the faint ticking of the mantel clock. Julian laughed a short, nervous bark. "A character clause? What is this, a Dickens novel?" "Your great-grandfather was a specific man, Mr. Blackwood," Thorne said, adjusting his glasses. "He was also, you may recall, a man who built his empire from nothing. He had very strong opinions on entitlement and poor breeding." He stressed the last 2 words, and Emily felt, rather than saw, Beatrice Blackwood flinch beside him. "He was concerned," Thorne continued, "that the Blackwood line, as he put it in his private correspondence, had become soft, arrogant, and diluted from the realities of true work. He feared you would treat his company like a playground." "This is slander," Beatrice shrieked. "Arthur loved us." "He did," Ms. Reed agreed softly. "Which is why he left your family 20% of the company's shares, this house, and the properties in Aspen and St. Bart's, a more than generous provision." Julian's face went white. "Wait. 20%. We control the estate. We control the majority." "No." Mr. Thorne said, his voice laced with the ice of legal finality. "You never did. You controlled the board, which he allowed, but the controlling interest, 51% of Pendleton Global Enterprises, was placed by Arthur Pendleton into a sealed, irrevocable trust 50 years ago. Marcus looked as if he was about to have a stroke. A trust for who? Mr. Thorne and Ms. Reed did not look at Marcus. They didn't look at Julian or Beatrice. They both turned in perfect unison, and their eyes scanned the length of the table. They passed the drunken cousin. They passed the teenagers, and their gaze landed with absolute, unwavering certainty on Emily. The air in the dining room was thick and unbreathable. Every eye followed the lawyer's gaze to the small, quiet woman at the end of the table. Emily felt the weight of their collective stare like a physical blow. She sat her hands folded in her lap, her back perfectly straight. "What is this?" Julian's voice was a strained whisper. "What are you looking at her for?" Mr. Thorne cleared his throat. He held up a thick vellum envelope sealed with the dark red wax of the Pendleton crest. "As I said, Mr. Pendleton was a specific man. He believed his empire should be inherited not by the bloodline that expected it, but by the one that deserved it. He was to be blunt disgusted by the way his daughter Amelia, Mrs. Vance, was treated by this family after her scandalous marriage." "Amelia was a fool," Beatrice spat. "She threw her life away on a poet. She did." Mr. Thorne agreed, and in doing so, she proved to her father that she valued something more than his money. This, he felt, made her line the only one worthy of inheriting his real legacy. He wrote a codicil, a final binding testament. Ms. Reed stepped forward, taking the envelope. This document was executed on March 1st, 1975. It has been held in our firm's vault with explicit instructions. It states that the 51% controlling interest in Pendleton Global Enterprises was to be held in the Amelia Vance Trust. She paused, looking directly at Emily, until the sole surviving heir of Amelia Vance's line reached the age of 30, and provided that said heir had met 2 conditions. "Conditions," Marcus muttered, clutching the back of a chair. Ms. Reed read from the document. "Condition 1. The heir must have been gainfully employed in a field of humble service or academic pursuit for no less than 5 years." She looked up. "Ms. Emily Vance has been an archivist at the Morgan Library for 7 years. Condition 2. Ms. Reed continued, her voice gaining strength. "The heir must not have in any way attempted to contact the executors, petition the family for funds, or otherwise shown any grasping, gold-digging, or Blackwood-esque tendencies." The insult written 50 years ago hung in the air. "This is insane," Julian exploded. "She's a librarian. She doesn't know the first thing about private equity or shipping logistics. This would ruin the company." "Mr. Pendleton disagreed," Thorne said, taking over. "He believed a century of rapacious, arrogant men had done enough damage. He wanted, and I quote from his personal letter to us, someone who knows the value of $1 because they've had to earn it. Someone who respects the past. Someone who knows how to be quiet and read the damn room." He felt an archivist was in fact the perfect choice. Emily felt her vision swim. She wasn't just sitting at the table. She was the reason for the trust. This whole time, her quiet life, her modest job, her refusal to beg the Blackwoods for anything. It hadn't been a weakness. It had been a test she hadn't even known she was taking. And so, Mr. Thorne concluded, the trust contained a trigger. It was set to dissolve and transfer ownership to the heir on their 30th birthday, unless the Blackwood-appointed board attempted to install an unvetted heir to the CAO position first. which Mr. Blackwood you did this morning." You knew," Marcus whispered. "We were informed of the board vote at 11:04 a.m., Ms. Reed said. "As per our instructions, that action immediately triggered the entitlement clause, accelerating the transfer. The electronic transfer of the 51% share block from the trust to Ms. Vance's name was finalized by the SEC and the Banking Commission at 6:00 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. 2 hours ago." She closed her briefcase. The sound was like a gavel. "This dinner is lovely. But it is, I'm afraid, legally irrelevant." Mr. Thorne stepped forward and walked the entire length of the table. He stopped directly in front of Emily, who finally slowly rose to her feet. The entire family watched their faces a mask of horror and disbelief. He bowed his head slightly. "Miss Emily Vance, on behalf of Cravath, Swain and Moore, and the estate of your great-grandfather, Arthur Pendleton, may I be the first to congratulate you. You are the majority shareholder and the rightful owner of Pendleton Global Enterprises." For a full 30 seconds, the only sound in the room was the faint, frantic breathing of Beatrice Blackwood. Julian stood as if frozen, his champagne glass still held aloft from the toast to himself. Then he dropped it. The crystal flute shattered on the hardwood floor, a sharp, violent sound that broke the spell. "No!" he roared, his face contorted in a mask of pure rage. "I don't accept this. This is a fraud. A coup. This is madness," Marcus echoed, finding his voice. He jabbed a thick finger at Emily. She can't even balance a checkbook. She's a child. I am 30 years old." "Uncle Marcus," Emily said. Her voice, so long quiet, was now astonishingly clear. It didn't tremble. It didn't waver. It simply was. "And I am, as Mr. Thorne just explained, your new boss." Beatrice let out a high, keening wail. "Our life's work, given to her, the little grey mouse. This will not stand," Julian shouted, advancing on the lawyers. "Our firm, Sullivan & Cromwell, will have you disbarred. We will litigate this into dust. We will tie her up in court until she's 80. She'll never see a dime." Mr. Thorne, who had dealt with angry, entitled men for 40 years, didn't even blink. He looked at Julian with an expression of mild disappointment. "Mr. Blackwood, please," he said, as one would to a toddler having a tantrum. "Do you really think Arthur Pendleton was that naive? Do you think we are—" He tapped his briefcase. "This isn't just a will, sir. It's a fortress. It was vetted by 2 separate federal judges and the New York State Attorney General's office in 1975. But your great-grandfather knew you would be emotional." He added, Ms. Reed said, her voice cutting like a razor, "a no-contest clause. A rather robust one." "What no-contest clause?" Marcus demanded, his bluster fading into raw panic. "The one," Thorne said, "that states that if any member of the Blackwood family or any firm acting on their behalf challenges the legitimacy of the Amelia Vance Trust, its execution or its heir, the Blackwood family's remaining 20% stake in Pendleton Global is immediately and irrevocably forfeited." The blood drained from Marcus's face. "Forfeited," Beatrice whispered. "Forfeited to whom?" Mr. Thorne allowed himself a very small, very dry smile. Given Miss Vance's profession, Mr. Pendleton thought it only fitting. The 20% share block, currently valued at approximately $2 billion, would be liquidated and donated to the New York Public Library system. Julian looked like he had been physically struck. All the fight went out of him. The threat of losing 51% was bad. The threat of losing everything, of going from a billionaire to a mere multi-millionaire with only a house and a jet, was unthinkable. It was corporate extinction. All eyes in the room, the cousins, the fiancé, the staff peering from the kitchen, were now on Emily. They were no longer looking at her with contempt or pity. They were looking at her with something new. Fear. Emily took a step forward, away from the shadows of the cheap seats. She walked along the side of the long table, her sensible heels clicking on the floor. She stopped when she was parallel with the head of the table, standing directly across from her 3 stunned relatives. She picked up Julian's untouched dessert plate. She looked at the melted chocolate sphere. "A new era, Julian. I believe you're right." She turned her gaze, sweeping over the family. "For 30 years, you have treated my mother, my grandmother, and me as a stain on your reputation. You mocked our lives, our work, our breeding." She looked directly at Beatrice. "You were right about one thing, Aunt. It is a matter of breeding. My grandmother was bred from a line of character. She gave that to my mother. My mother gave it to me. We were taught integrity, resilience, and the value of hard work." Her eyes snapped to Julian. "You were bred from a line of arrogance. You were taught that your name was a weapon and your wealth a shield. You were taught that you deserved everything and earned nothing." "You laughed at me tonight," she said, her voice dangerously quiet. "You laughed at my dress. You laughed at my job. You laughed at my life. You held a toast to withered branches." She stood tall, and for the first time everyone in the room saw the shadow of Arthur Pendleton in her posture, the steel in her spine. "Well, the withered branch just inherited the entire forest. The mouse it turns to owns the cheese." The shift in power was absolute and instantaneous. It was as if gravity had reversed. Now, Emily," Marcus began, his voice suddenly oily and placating. He tried for a smile, but it was a hideous grimace. "Let's not be hasty. We're family. We can work together. I can mentor you, guide you. Julian can stay on as COO. You need us." Emily let the silence hang for a moment. "You're right, Uncle. We are family. And as family, I'm sure you'll be happy to help me with the transition." Marcus brightened. Yes, of course." "Excellent," Emily said. She turned to Mr. Thorne. "Mr. Thorne, please schedule an emergency all-hands board meeting for 9:00 a.m. tomorrow. I will be presiding." "Of course, Ms. Vance." "Ms. Reed," Emily continued, "please initiate an immediate full-scale forensic audit of the last 10 years of Pendleton Global's financials. I want a specific focus on executive compensation expense accounts and all acquisitions, especially the recent one in Singapore." Julian's bloodshot eyes widened in panic. "You can't do that. That deal is sensitive." "If it's sensitive, it should be handled delicately." "I'm very delicate," Emily said. "I am, after all, just an archivist. I'm excellent at reading fine print." She turned back to Marcus. "Uncle, you will have your resignation as chairman on my desk by 8:00 a.m. You will retain your board seat for now. As for your mentorship, I don't think I need guidance from the man who leveraged this company to the brink of collapse in 2008. Marcus staggered back, speechless. "Aunt Beatrice," Emily said, turning to the woman, "the Pendleton Foundation. You are no longer the chairwoman. I will be taking over effective immediately. I'm sure the public library will be very grateful for our newfound focus on humble service." Beatrice made a small, choking sound. Finally, Emily faced Julian. He was shaking a mixture of rage and terror. You can't do this to me," he whispered. "You asked me if I still take the subway." "Julian," Emily said, walking closer to him. "I do. It's efficient. But tomorrow I'll be taking the private elevator to the 80th floor, the CEO's office. You, however," she looked him up and down just as he had done to her, "you will be cleaning out your desk. You are not the COO. You are not the CEO. You are not even an employee. Your security pass will be deactivated at midnight. I believe you have 3 hours. You bitch," he spat. "You'll have to be more specific, Julian," Emily said, unfazed. "Your fiancée Chloe looks a little upset. You might want to reassure her that your trust fund is still, well, that it still exists, for now, assuming you don't file that lawsuit." Chloe, who had been watching her entire future dissolve, burst into tears and ran from the room. Emily had dismantled them piece by piece with the same methodical precision she used to catalogue a medieval manuscript. She looked at the rest of the table, at the pale, shocked faces of the cousins who had laughed at her. "The dinner is over," she announced. "Thank you all for coming." She turned to the butler, who was watching with wide, respectful eyes. "Please call me a car, a simple one. A black Lincoln town car will be fine." "Yes, Ms. Vance," he said, Ms. Vance, as if it were a royal title. Emily walked to the foyer, retrieved her simple wool coat, and put it on. Mr. Thorne and Miss Reed joined her. "That was," Mr. Thorne began. "Impressive," Miss Reed finished. "Your great-grandfather would have been exceptionally proud." "He left me a very difficult job, Miss Reed," Emily said, buttoning her coat. "He left me a company full of wolves." "So he did," Thorne said, opening the massive front door for her. The cold night air felt wonderful. "But it seems to me, Miss Vance, he left it to the only lion in the family." Emily nodded. She walked out of the mansion, not looking back at the shattered family dinner behind her. She left them in the ruins of their arrogance, the laughter still echoing in the opulent room, dead and hollow. The heavy silence in the Blackwood mansion which followed Emily's departure was not an ending. It was a vacuum, a pause before the thunderclap. For the Blackwoods, it was the suffocating silence of absolute defeat. For Emily, it was the quiet 400 a.m. hum of a single-cup coffee maker in a 400-square-foot Brooklyn studio. She had not slept. After the town car dropped her off, she had walked past her sleeping doorman, climbed the 4 flights to her apartment, and locked the door. The adrenaline of the confrontation had felt like a live wire humming beneath her skin. For a few moments, she had stood in the center of her small room, surrounded by her books, her quiet life, and simply breathed. She owned a $70 billion multinational corporation. The thought was so absurd, so monumental that her mind, trained to categorize and order, struggled to file it. It was a fact without a precedent. But an archivist knows that history is not just about grand, sweeping events. It is about the small, meticulous details that build a case. It is about the paper trail, and the Blackwoods, in their arrogance, had left a paper trail a mile wide. At 4:15 a.m., her phone buzzed. A secure text from a number she didn't recognize, but the message was clear. "I'm in. The files you requested are unlocked. You were right. He buried it 3 layers deep. S.J." Emily permitted herself a small, grim smile. SJ was Sarah Jenkins, the Executive Vice President of Finance, a brilliant, overlooked woman who Marcus Blackwood had repeatedly passed over for promotion in favor of less qualified men who belonged to his golf club. Emily, in her first act of due diligence the night before, while the Blackwoods were still laughing at her dress, had found Ms. Jenkins. She had made a high-risk, high-reward gambit, sending her a single encrypted message. "I know what Julian is doing with the Singapore acquisition. I am the new owner. Help me, and you will be my COO." It had taken Sarah Jenkins exactly 45 minutes to respond. Now, with the final piece of evidence in her possession, Emily Vance showered the hot water, washing away the lingering scent of the Blackwoods' opulent dining room. She did not dress in silks or power suits. She chose her armor carefully. A charcoal grey sheath dress, severe and elegant. Her sensible heels. Her hair was pulled back into the same simple, functional chignon she always wore. She was not a Blackwood. She was an archivist, and she was going to work. At 7:30 a.m., a new town car, this one sent by her law firm, was waiting. At 8:30 a.m., she walked into the lobby of the Pendleton Global Tower on Park Avenue. The lobby was a cathedral of black marble and brushed steel. The security guard's men, who would have dismissed her as a cater waiter the day before, snapped to attention. Their eyes were wide. The all-night memo from the legal department had been disseminated. "Ms. Vance, good morning." The head of security, a man named Doyle, looked as if he'd seen a ghost. "Mr. Doyle." Emily said, her voice calm. "Please ensure that Mr. Julian Blackwood's access is fully revoked. If he attempts to enter the building, have him politely escorted from the premises. No scenes. Is that understood?" "Yes, ma'am. We already handled that, ma'am. At 2:14 this morning. He was not polite." "I expected as much," Emily said. "Thank you for your professionalism." She was escorted to a private wood-paneled elevator that required a unique key. It opened directly onto the 80th floor, the executive floor. The doors slid open to a hushed, antique carpeted reception area. A terrified-looking executive assistant, who had clearly been Julian's, leaped to her feet. "Miss Vance, Mr. Blackwood." "Mr. Marcus Blackwood is attending the board meeting," Emily said, not unkindly. "I am not here to purge staff, Miss Patel. Cynthia Patel." "Ms. Patel, I am here to restore order. Please get me the minutes from the last 4 board meetings and a large black coffee. Then please call Human Resources and inform them that Ms. Sarah Jenkins's promotion to Chief Operating Officer is effective immediately. I want her in my office, this office." She gestured to the grand double doors at 10:30 a.m. Yes, ma'am." Cynthia Patel looked at Emily with dawning, unadulterated awe. Emily nodded and walked toward the boardroom. This was it. She pushed open the heavy oak doors. The room was silent. It was a long, cavernous space, dominated by a table that looked like it was carved from a single redwood tree. On one side, a wall of glass offered a godlike view of Central Park, green and distant. On the other, a massive, imposing oil painting of Arthur Pendleton himself, staring down at the proceedings. Seated around the table were the 7 remaining board members. At the far end, looking grey, shrunken, and utterly broken, sat Marcus Blackwood. The other 6 were the men who had propped up his reign for decades. There was Lawrence Henderson, the slick, silver-haired head of a major investment bank, a man who believed he, not Marcus, was the true power. There was General McTavish, retired a man from the defense contracting world, who saw Pendleton as a personal bank. There were 2 empty suits, cronies, who voted however Marcus told them. And in the corner was Dr. Evelyn Hayes, an academic from Wharton, the board's single token woman who Emily knew from her research was consistently ignored. They all stared at her. Emily walked her heels clicking with metronomic purpose, not to an empty seat on the side, but to the grand, high-backed chair at the head of the table. The chairman's seat, Arthur Pendleton's seat. She placed her leather satchel on the floor, sat and folded her hands on the table. She said nothing. She simply waited, letting the silence stretch, forcing them to acknowledge the shift. Finally, Lawrence Henderson, the banker, broke. He gave a forced, paternalistic chuckle. "Well, Ms. Vance, Emily, this is quite the turn of events. Quite the drama." He smiled as if sharing a joke. "I knew your great-grandfather. A fine man. A strong man. I'm sure he would have been amused by this." "Amused?" Emily's voice was quiet, but it cut through the room. "I doubt that Mr. Henderson, my great-grandfather, from all accounts, detested being played for a fool." Henderson's smile tightened. "Now, Emily, let's be practical. You are, as we all now understand, the majority shareholder. A remarkable development. But a title is not the same as experience. This," he gestured around the room, "is a $70 billion machine. It has many complex moving parts. You are an archivist." "I am," Emily agreed. "Exactly," Henderson said, leaning forward, his voice dropping into a conspiratorial, let-me-help-you tone. "What you need is a steady hand. You need guidance. You have the shares, yes. But we, this board, we have the expertise. I propose we formalize a new structure. You, of course, can take your great-aunt's place as head of the foundation. A noble, visible role. And you can retain the chairmanship in title. But you will delegate all executive authority to a new CEO, someone tested, someone like me." General McTavish grunted his approval. "Good plan, Lawrence. Solid. The girl gets the title, we keep the engine running. No fuss. The markets will understand." Emily listened, her expression unreadable. When they were finished, she looked at each of them one by one. "You are correct, Mr. Henderson," she said. "I am an archivist, and you are correct, General. This is a complex machine. But you have all made a fundamental and frankly lazy error in judgment." She opened her satchel and pulled out a single, neatly bound file. "You've mistaken my profession for a weakness. You think because I work with the past, I cannot function in the present. But what does an archivist do? We read. We cross-reference. We find the paper trail. We uncover the truth that people have tried to bury. We more than anyone know exactly where the bodies are buried." She placed the file on the table with a soft thud. "Which brings me," she said, "to the Singapore acquisition." Marcus Blackwood made a small, strangled sound. Henderson's face for the first time lost its smirk. "A brilliant deal, Julian called it," Emily continued. "A masterstroke. You all voted to approve it yesterday morning, unanimously. A sound, strategic move," Henderson said, his voice now clipped. "Expanding our footprint in the Asian logistics market." "Stop," Emily said. "It was not a request. Stop lying." She stood and walked to the digital projector at the end of the room. She plugged in a thumb drive. The first document that appeared on the massive screen was the incorporation filing for Caspian Holdings Group, the company Julian was acquiring. Caspian Holdings Group, Emily narrated, her voice as dry as old parchment. Registered in the Cayman Islands. Its listed assets are, well, nothing. It's a shell corporation filed 6 weeks ago. She clicked to the next slide. A list of signatories. And who is the sole director of this worthless shell company? A man named Richard Devane. A collective sharp intake of breath. Even Dr. Hayes, the quiet academic, sat bolt upright. Richard Devane, Emily said, as in the father of Chloe Devane, Julian's fiancé. You were not voting to acquire a company, gentlemen. You were voting to approve Julian's $400 million wedding present to his future father-in-law. The room exploded. That's preposterous, Henderson blustered, but sweat was beading on his forehead. Marcus, what is this? General McTavish roared, turning on the grey-faced man. You let your boy do this. I didn't know, Marcus whispered, a pathetic defense. Julian, he handled the file. You signed it, Marcus, Emily snapped, clicking to the next slide. Marcus's heavy, arrogant signature was at the bottom of the wire transfer authorization. And you, she said, her gaze sweeping over the other board members, were all legally required to perform due diligence. You are the board. You are the final line of defense. Did any of you ask for the asset sheet? Did any of you look into the provenance of Caspian Holdings? Or did you just take Julian at his word? Collect your $100,000 board fee and go to lunch. Silence. The no was deafening. So, Emily said, this is not an acquisition. It's felony embezzlement. It's wire fraud. It's conspiracy. And you gentlemen, by voting yes without a single question, are all at best guilty of gross catastrophic negligence. And at worst, she let the word hang, complicit. Henderson went white. McTavish looked as if he was going to be sick. This stays in this room, Henderson hissed. We can unwind it. We kill the deal. No one has to know. No, Emily said. I kill the deal, which I did at 6:15 this morning by placing a call to the Attorney General's office and the SEC. I informed them that as the new majority shareholder, I had uncovered significant active fraud and was moving to stop it and cooperate fully. The men looked at her in pure, unadulterated horror. She hadn't just beaten them. She had annihilated them using their own laziness as the weapon. You what? McTavish gasped. You'll destroy the stock price. You'll ruin us. I will save the company, Emily corrected, her voice like ice. By cutting out the rot. The market doesn't like fraud, General. It loves a new owner who cleans house. She walked back to her chair and sat down. So here is what is going to happen, she said, a general addressing her defeated troops. Mr. Henderson, General McTavish, and your 2 associates. Your resignations on my desk. Now. She slid 4 sheets of paper and a pen down the table. You will resign effective immediately for personal reasons. In exchange, when I am asked by the SEC, I will state that you were not active conspirators, but were deeply negligent and misled by the previous executive. I am offering you the chance to walk out of this building with your reputation in tatters but without an indictment. It was a brutal, brilliant move, a complete checkmate. Henderson, shaking with rage, grabbed the pen and signed. McTavish followed his face, purple. The other 2 signed so fast they nearly tore the paper. Dr. Hayes, Emily said, turning to the only other woman, you also voted yes. Why? Dr. Hayes looked up, her eyes clear. Because when I asked to see the due diligence file in the pre-meeting, Mr. Henderson told me not to trouble my pretty little head with the numbers and to trust that the men in the room knew what they were doing. Emily nodded. You will remain on the board. In fact, you will be heading the new Compensation and Ethics Committee. I expect your first report in 1 week. Dr. Hayes looked at Emily, a slow smile spreading across her face. I accept. The 4 men stood defeated. They were old, powerful, and utterly obsolete. They filed out of the room, not even looking at Marcus. Now only 2 were left. Emily Vance at the head of the table, and Marcus Blackwood, stranded at the other end, a king in his castle now reduced to a prisoner. Emily, he croaked, his voice thick. Please, I'll do anything. I'll retire. I'll go away. Don't take the house. Beatrice, it will kill her. It's family. Family. Emily repeated the word, tasting like ash. You mean the family you laughed at? The family you humiliated? The family whose name you were so desperate to erase, even as you lived off the scraps of her father's genius? She stood up and walked the length of the table until she was standing over him. You have your 20% stake, Uncle. You have the house. You have the jet. My great-grandfather, in his wisdom, left you that. I am bound by his will. I will not take also what is yours. Marcus looked up, a pathetic flicker of hope in his eyes. But your job, Emily said, her voice dropping to a whisper. Your title, your power, those were never yours. You were a steward, a placeholder, and you failed. Your resignation was on my desk at 8:00 a.m. as I requested. Your access is revoked. Mr. Doyle will escort you from the building. Emily, he begged, your grandmother, Amelia, she would not have wanted this. Emily stared at him, her gaze so cold it seemed to burn. My grandmother would not have wanted her name spit on at your dinner table. My grandmother would have wanted her father's legacy protected. She turned away from him. Goodbye, Uncle. She walked out of the boardroom, not looking back. She heard a single broken sob, and then the heavy door clicked shut behind her, sealing the past away. She walked into the CEO's office, her office where Cynthia Patel and a sharp-looking woman with a fiery expression were waiting. Ms. Vance, the new woman said, stepping forward and shaking Emily's hand firmly. Sarah Jenkins, I've seen the reports. It's worse than we thought, but it's fixable. Good, Emily said, because you're my new COO. Let's get to work. Emily spent the next 10 hours in that office, initiating a full-scale corporate restructuring. She sent out a company-wide memo. My name is Emily Vance. I am the new owner. The era of arrogance is over. The era of excellence begins now. Your hard work, not your last name, is what matters here. At 9:00 p.m., she finally left. She declined the company car and driver. She walked 10 blocks and took the 4 train downtown. She got off at the Brooklyn Bridge City Hall station and began the walk home, the cold November wind whipping at her coat. The magnificent, glittering skyline of Manhattan, the city she now, in a very real way, owned a piece of sprawled out before her. She stopped at the center of the bridge, looking at the dark, churning water below. She was an archivist, a preserver of history, but today she had become its author. The Blackwoods had tried to write the Vances out of the story, to reduce them to a forgotten footnote. But Emily Vance, the quiet librarian, the last of her line, had just written the final chapter. And it was a reckoning. And so Emily Vance, the woman they mocked, took her seat at the head of the table, not just for dinner, but for the rest of their lives. This story shows us that true strength isn't about the noise you make, but the moves you prepare in silence. The Blackwoods thought she was a mouse, but they forgot that a mouse can chew through the ropes of a lion's net. In the end, it wasn't her name that gave her power, but her character. What did you think of Emily's ultimate revenge? Was it karma or was it justice? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you loved this story of drama and a powerful comeback, please like this video, share it with someone who needs to see that the underdog can win, and be sure to subscribe to the channel for more stories where karma is the final word. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss an update.